One, two, three, I never do two takes. Hi there, my friends. Uh, I'm sorry I have been away for a while. As many of you know, I don't very much like the holidays, and these ones in particular were not the best for me. So I didn't wish to share my not so positive feelings about the holidays with the rest of you, and I kind of kept it to myself, and I hope you'll indulge me with that. Now, the flip side of that is that I happen to have turned on the news last night, and I noticed things are a little strange and crazy, and some of you perhaps are sitting around at home with nothing to do, uh, you know, perhaps in need of a diversion, and it's precisely at those times when I find myself becoming more calm and more self assured and more wanting to reach out to the rest of you who, might be looking for interesting things to do on the side. So here's the thing I wanted to talk to you about, right? Because my whole life is the story of abandoned projects that I just haven't had time to finish, right? And the only way that I'm able to even create any artwork at all is because I've set it up all around myself so that I can instantly jump on it. And I was able to stick with it for over an hour to get all this crap working here. So, we're going to see this one through. But I got to tell you, the video making thing isn't so easy for me. Anyways, to proceed. One of the things I have always wanted to do, I for over 10 years now, I've had this idea for an adult education type of course, maybe I don't know, some sort of series that has to do with this lad here, the Saturn V, and the entire project of the Apollo moon mission and all of that. That's been a favorite study of mine my entire life. Naturally spawning out of the fact that my father worked on it. He, helped build the descent stage of the lunar module. If you're a super nerd, you know that that's the one that actually landed on the moon and then served as the launch platform for the subsequent stage that returned back to lunar orbit. Now, if you don't know that, well, I was thinking it would be pretty cool to sort of get you there. How did all that happen and all of that? Now, there's a million, billion, trillion documentaries out there that you can pick up and watch and say, yeah, But I thought, well, I'm in the middle of building this bad boy here, the Lego Saturn V, and I thought, well, maybe this is a way to tie in that old course that I had rattling around in my head, And if I may segue a little bit into this, I feel sad that I have missed my opportunity to bring my father into this, because I really did. He and I talked about it. We batted it around, but it just never came to be, and that's part of the maybe another reason why I'm addressing this now. And then, there's another part of it too, which is that all of these documentaries, they tick me off in a particular way, which is that they all seem to follow the same template, if you will, for a moon documentary. And almost all of them start off with President Kennedy saying, we choose to go to the moon not because it's easy, but because it's had. Right? Well, okay. What if I told you that the story doesn't begin there at all? That is the end point of the story of getting to the moon. And I believe that you can follow that story of getting to the moon from the F1 engine of the Saturn V. And you can go from here and you can discover, I think, that the story of the F1 engine predates the rest of the rocket by a solid 6 years. And in fact, it had been under development since 1955. And how did you get to that? Well, what happened was somewhere in the mid 1950s, the Air Force decided we're going to do an end game sort of move here on these big ass rockets. And we're just going to guess what's the biggest possible engine we can pull off in the shortest amount of time that does the most amount of work that's most feasible, right? And how would it be that they could come to that sort of a design decision when the end product is so far in the future you don't even know what it looks like, you don't know what it's going to do, and you don't know how it works? And the answer to that actually goes through Congress to an entirely different kind of race, which was the naval arms race of the first half of the 1900s. Someday I would have loved to have done like a whole show about how you start off with this single ship that was created by the brainchild of this dude named Jackie Fisher, and he came up with the Dreadnaught. And if you're a battleship nerd and you watch Druck Findel's YouTube channel, well, good for you, because that thing is awesome. If not, probably know that there was this arms race of battleships, right? Like every country wanted the bigger, meaner battleship, and there was this definite thing going on where if your ship had more armor, their guns bounced off of your shit and you could take over. Oh, by the way, this isn't for kids. So on and so forth. There eventually was a treaty, the Washington Naval Treaty of the 1920s, and that actually set the course of the entire Pacific War and World War II. That treaty did. But among other things, just before the treaty, members of Congress started getting tired of this game where every subsequent year the battleships were getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And they had the money, right? And they were noticing that the budgets for these battleships were getting very large, a significant percentage of the gross domestic product, if you will, right? So I forget exactly who the members of Congress were, and this is disappointing to me because, well, if I'm going to do this properly, I would cite all this crap, but I haven't. Anyways, these guys sort of put together, it wasn't a law, they commissioned an end game study on battleships. And those of you who look into the history of big giant battleships and what could have been, I forget what this guy's called, but it's the something design study. I believe it actually happened when it was perceived that the Washington Naval Treaty would not be renewed or would be violated by the Germans. I forget how all that works. Anyways, move that forward 20 years from 1935 to 1955, and the Air Force is sitting there asking for money for rockets, and somebody remembered the endgame study in the battleship race. And there was, of course, a nuclear arms race, and that nuclear arms race was revolving around ICBMs, which were, rockets that could throw a nuclear weapon, right? And considerably smaller than this bad boy. And the warheads were getting bigger and bigger and heavier and heavier, and the two nations were, the United States and the Soviet Union, were having this pissing contest with, who had the bigger and deadlier nuclear weapon, and the Soviets blew off this one, I believe it was 58 megatons, and they had apparently produced it in numbers. I think it was called the Tsar Bomba, maybe? Anyways, and they announced that they had the potential to make a fusion warhead that was 100 megatons, which is so absurdly big you can imagine it making a crater. I think I want to say it was around 20 miles wide if you were to drop it on the middle of DC. Whatever. To do that, you were going to need a really freaking big rocket. And so, starting in 1955, the Air Force was like, okay, we are going to look for the biggest rocket that we can possibly build in the ship. I already told you all that. And so there you go. Now what happened was when the Soviet Union launched a dude into space, Yuri Gagarin, and the United States started really flipping out. They, wanted a race that they could win, and an objective that they felt that they could achieve ahead of the Soviet Union. And all those guys, the so-called eggheads, I believe they were, of President Kennedy, got together and started asking the question, well, what can we do that's going to be bigger and more impressive than those other guys who already have the edge on us? And that's when somebody remembered that they had the ace in the hole of the F-1, the mighty F-1. Someday I would like to be able to give you all of the statistics and figures of how great and huge and gigantic this engine is, but that's for another time when I sit down and do some actual research. In the meantime, well, there's your little story for the day, right? It's been awfully fun building this thing, too. If you don't mind, we can jump on over to the kit itself, which is totally awesome. It costs about, like 120 bucks or something. But if you're lucky enough to find one that was dropped on the corner like this one was, you get it significantly discounted. And since I'm not a collector, I'm just a space nerd, I don't care if the box is torn. I've been kind of nice to it, by comparison to the other stuff I tear up. But, stuff comes to me to die, man. It doesn't, whatever. Anyways, it's a really awesome kit. Here, I will try to hold this still, and those of you who are in HD can sit there and check it out in all its amazing glory. Here's another thing that ticks me off about all space documentaries is this sort of map, right? Now, I know most of y'all, and I know all y'all are smart motherfuckers, right? You don't need a picture like this. This is for kids. This is for toddlers, man. But we don't teach anybody how to actually get into space. And why we can't do it now, right? I mean, the Chinese are probably going to pull this off really soon, and that's going to be pretty neat. You want to talk about an end of the decade prediction. I think there's a really good chance that taikonauts are going to be walking on the surface of the moon within the next 10 years. And you might see other nations hurriedly trying to catch up. You might see some independent companies actually putting everyone else to shame. And if that's the case, I should like a ticket on that, please. Anyways, so I was thinking that, maybe since now is, a time when everybody might want to be sitting around indoors, like maybe if you liked, you could follow along with me as we approached going to the moon from some different directions. And if you see, I'm thinking, like you as an adult here, if you follow along with these toys and you follow these explanations along, well, when all of this starts to actually happen here in a few years and things start to get really interesting, well, you'll be able to follow along, right? And it's not going to be like, oh, wow, look at this big rocket going up. Which I also dearly love. But you'll be watching it and you'll say, oh, look, here's your guy. It's going up. You want to get up to a certain altitude before you really begin your gravity turn so that you can fire downrange, and you know that the amount that you're going up matters about 1/200th as this downrange velocity matters. Because as I was saying to myself and maybe others earlier today, that the trick here is to be going fast, so fast that you're falling where the planet Earth isn't anymore. And and you will learn that conventionally in the history of spacecraft, the way that you do that is by tossing off your subsequent giant mass, which are these mighty F1 engines, which in this case had to be tossed straight into the Atlantic Ocean in order for the S2 stage to continue along. And the only job of all the fuel in this guy was to carry all the fuel in this guy. And then the job of all the fuel in this guy was to shoot all of this stuff to the moon. And then the job of this guy was to bring all of it back. I don't feel like any of that gets really discussed, and who knows? Maybe it's a subject that isn't just of interest to me. So yeah, I thought I would do that as a shorter introduction to the Lego thing. You'll notice that it's built in stages, right? So here's S1C. Here's I believe S2 is what it was called. You would think it should be called S2, right? But that's a story all unto itself, because all this stuff went through so many different crazy ideas and iterations that the names actually stuck in place for these things while the design changed. So there you go. Model C of the S1 stage. S2. I believe this guy up here is called an S4, but I could be wrong about that because, I don't know, the S3 was part of a different design. Who cares? Whatever. Anyways, if you're interested in any of that, I thought, well, maybe now is the time to start talking about it. And if I kept up with the nerd shit long enough, a lot of you might actually find yourselves becoming familiar with, other concepts too, like how doggone difficult it is just to, push that much mass out there. And then when you do, like the risks you're taking with your life support and all of that. And all of that stuff is so interesting. And wouldn't it be nice if you had a passing interest in this? Perhaps what has made it so opaque to you in the past is that, well, nobody went along and cherry picked all the really interesting stuff. Like how you pooped and, what you threw overboard when you were trying to come back so that you could carry more rocks. How do you hide a golf club in all of your stuff? And how do you start your rocket after you busted off the start button? That actually happened on Apollo 11. That sort of stuff is great, and I don't know. I like those stories, and well, maybe if I keep up with it, I'll be able to tell you a different story using this fine prop and the ability to perhaps blend in some interesting pictures and stuff like that. That's about as far as my editing skills go these days. So that was my idea. I thought I might start with that, and I know it rambles and I know it goes all over the place because I had no plan. Ha ha! I had no plan. I just decided that if I didn't get off my butt and start talking about it, it wasn't ever gonna happen at all. So there you go. Maybe I'm on the hook for this space crap with you for a little while. If you need something to watch and do, well, there you have it. Here's 20 minutes of your life you just spun away thinking about Legos. So there you go. I hope that was worth a damn. Thank you so much for your time, and I will talk to you soon.